Okay, Brad.
Yes.
I just had to wait 2 minutes for the beeps to work.
Wait, hang on. Do we need to back up and explain what the is the beeps a term of art? Is that jargon? Is that
Do you
something
think
we
people
need to
know what the
explain?
beeps are?
I don't know if I'm ready to reveal the secret to the world. Especially, now that we're doing a lot of FOSSPod guests and stuff.
People know.
Our most recent guests were very excited at the tool.
People are always excited at the tool.
And it occurred to me, like, every time we have guests on and reveal this tool to them so they can use it, they might go tell other people about it. And then someday the person who is hosting this for us might wake up and go, why are suddenly 50,000 people hitting this tool all at once?
But you think the tool's going to go viral?
What if it did? You know what? There are not that many podcasters in the world.
You say that, but I don't know that that's actually true. I think there are a lot of podcasters in the world.
Actually, that is our kind of Andy Warhol digital reality, right? Like everybody's got 15 minutes of podcasting in them, waiting to happen.
Do you remember how hard it was to podcast in like 2005?
No, it wasn't for me because we had a turnkey solution because we just used the upstairs CNET radio studio.
Oh God, that must have been nice.
That had been built out with like $200,000 worth of radio equipment. So we were actually like this Electro Voice RE20 that I'm talking into.
Oh, you're using the same hardware.
We were talking into RE20s in 2006 when we did the hotspots.
Okay, so when we started the PC Gamer podcast and the Maximum PC podcast in like 2000, somewhere between 2005 and 2007, we were using shitty gaming headsets that were just sitting around the office and recording, I think, a Skype call. Actually,
now that you mention it, once we left and started doing the Bombcast, even then we had halfway decent mics. But yes, I know what you're talking about. Like a janky little cheap USB mixer plugged into a laptop and that sort of thing.
Well, that, and then the other side of it was like, you didn't want your podcast, unless you were making money on your podcast, you didn't want your podcast to get wildly popular because it was expensive.
Yeah.
Like
and also nobody was making money on podcasts really back then.
No. I mean, I want to say like the first time I heard about somebody making money on podcasts was probably Serial. And that was in like 2012, right? It was when we were at Whiskey.
Was Serial that long ago?
Serial was a long time ago now.
I guess you're right. Yeah, like even the Bombcast, like I don't remember ads becoming a really integral part of the pipeline until like 2015-ish.
I remember when we were in the basement at Whiskey, there was a actual conversation about, hey, we maybe should break the Bombcast into multiple shows because it costs too much to host one giant long 3-hour show that we didn't know if people actually listened to the whole thing.
I see people grouse about that moment to this day.
I mean, it was
like people to this day are like, hey, remember when they were going to split the Bombcast up and hold half of it back? Like,
we spent so much money hosting the Bombcast before there were ads, though. It was so expensive. And now you just pay $15 a month and they pay doesn't matter how many people download the show.
Bombcast, nothing. What about all those videos?
Well, okay.
Dude, people have no idea what Giant Bomb's hosting bills were.
But I mean, the thing was, when you looked at like what was actually costing money, because the Bombcast was so much, like the videos had good viewership, but like the Bombcast was a lot bigger than we spent the data costs for the Bombcast were really, really big. Anyway, I don't remember where I was going. Oh, I know where I was going with this. I automated my phone.
Oh,
well, there's this thing called the Shortcuts apps, which it used to have a much better name. It was Automator, like tomater, like Mater, I think.
Automator?
No, ER. Mater.
Oh, ER.
Yeah. And but the Shortcuts app, Apple bought them instead of just knocking them off. And you can do things like turn on and off pages of apps based on the time of day and the day of the week.
Pages of apps, meaning pages of the home screen?
Like home screen pages. Like I have a home screen page with my like most used apps like Discord and my phone app and texts and stuff like that.
If I turn off, you mean just like it will just hide that set of apps for 12 hours or whatever?
Yeah. So at 9 o'clock in the morning when I start working, my fucking around and like reading Kindle books and playing like solitaire and whatever games I have on my phone, that one goes away.
You have to take them away from yourself.
No, I don't. I don't have to. I do it because
yes.
Yeah. But then the other side of this is that my work apps come up then and like my work calendar comes up then, but then at 5 o'clock, my work calendar and my work apps go away and my goofing off apps come back. It's Will's time.
I see the appeal.
It's good. Also, it changes my watch face. So I have like a business and a party watch face.
Man. Yeah, we talked about shortcuts a while ago. You tipped me off to a fantastic use of it that I have yet to set up for some reason, which was to disable your pie holes at a click.
Yeah, my pie hole I can. Well, the problem is my pie hole disable app is on the Will's party time page, not on the Will's work time page.
That's got to be in the all the time.
Well, look, it's not a perfect system, Brad. That's a bad place to end this one, but I don't know.
Hey, look, we try to make these things go out on like nice pithy, something like funny or snappy, and that was like almost right there, but not quite. Like, how about
we need a witty rejoinder to it's not a perfect. Here, I'll give you another. I
got it here. We'll ingly dingly.
Perfect, nailed it. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I am Brad.
Brad, It's time to dip back into the well and get to one of my favorite topics.
Uh-oh. I mean, mine too, but I also stopped 30 seconds before we started recording this and said, should we really do another mass storage episode? Already?
World Wrestling Entertainment has been doing wrestling shows 2 or 5 times a week. Something, I don't know, a million times a week for like 100 years.
Well,
do you think they ever wake up in the morning like, hey, should we do like mixed martial arts instead of wrestling? No, they're like, it's a wrestling show.
I mean, if you're going to invoke the WWE example, then we need to, I think what you're saying is we need to start infusing way more drama into these episodes. Or
we just need to do NAS stuff every single week so people come for the NAS and stay for the tech.
Like if you're suggesting that we really get some kind of like lasting feud going between Synology and TrueNAS or something.
What if we get some lasting feud going between us and some other technology podcast and drive up interest in both, if you know what I mean?
Fucking all right, Marco Arment, you're on blast.
I'm going to break a folding chair over the back of Marco Arment's neck. I actually quite like him. He seems like a delightful human being. I don't know why I would. Anyway, the point is, we're talking about NASs this week.
It's the first one I could think of.
Wow. It would have been.
Okay. How about Gruber?
You got to pick somebody I know personally so they'll know it's a bit, and then they won't be like, hey, man, those dipshits over in San Francisco are talking smack about you. I don't want to. Gruber has a big platform. I'm afraid to start beef with him. We got to pick somebody closer to us, but not quite. Anyway,
no bad publicity.
Okay, fair. I mean, there have been times I would have broken a chair over Gruber's head, folding chaired Gruber. I don't know. He seems like a generally okay guy, despite being a Phillies fan. Anyway, my NAS died, as we established on the Patreon episode this month.
Yes, it did. Mine did too, but I guess we won't get into that here.
Well, you chose to go another path, which involves much more work than I did.
You went the simple, easy turnkey solution. I am currently sifting through workstation and server motherboards day and night.
But I had been my intent was to go on this path before the hardware failure that caused the problem. That brought my situation to a head, basically.
Yeah. You were looking to simplify.
Yeah. So I had a TrueNAS box. I've had some sort of home server starting with like an HP Windows home server box. Daddy, why is there a server in my house? That one, if you recall the ad campaign. Since like 2010, 2011, maybe even earlier before that. But it's been a FreeNAS or TrueNAS box for most of the last 10 years. And frankly, I'd reached a point where BSD was a limitation that I didn't want to deal with anymore. And it seemed like for a while TrueNAS was going to switch over to a Linux version, and I'm sure it's going to happen at some point, but I got tired of waiting.
That's out. That did happen. So just to clarify, TrueNAS Core is what used to be just plain old TrueNAS, which used to be for FreeNAS. TrueNAS Core is the FreeBSD one. TrueNAS Scale did finally come out of beta. It is out now.
Okay.
The first version. That's Debian based. It's got Docker and Kubernetes support and
too late.
All the Linuxy shit you would want. And ZFS, it's got all, I guess. But anyway.
Well, but at the same time, what I wanted was to have a turnkey solution for storage and maybe some light app use and a small dedicated high power machine with decent power management for compute heavy stuff like say a Plex server or game servers or whatever else happens in that space.
So you're not the only proponent of this philosophy. There's quite a few people on the Discord who also want the each box does one thing as opposed to like my approach, which is a NAS that also is kind of doing everything else at the same time. The thing that I always wonder about is the network bottleneck a bottleneck?
It depends on what you're doing. Like for my workloads, it doesn't matter. Like the heaviest thing I do is stream 4K movies off of a Plex server. Right.
Well, that's pretty heavy in terms of network throughput. Like that. Nope. Plex is the prototypical case that I'm thinking about here, where it's like, especially with a Plex server that is open to some number of external users like yours. Like if say, I don't know, how many people are likely to be streaming movies at the same time?
Judging by my logs, about an 60th
of a person
at any given time.
A 60th of a viewer.
I don't think I've ever had 3 external people.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I didn't expect that it was like some high performance, although there is that weird phenomenon of people out there charging for access to their Plex servers now. And like having, I've seen people that treat it almost like a little like budding home business where they're like, well, I gotta add like 8 more disks and like blah blah. I gotta add this and that because I need to be able to do 16 transcodes at once and stuff like that because they charge or whatever. So
I was gonna say like look, if somebody wanted to chuck a couple hard drives my way, I wouldn't say no when I pay the hard drive toll every 3 years.
What I mean is I see them advertising on forums and stuff.
That's
like on
gross.
Reddit.
That's
like they're like selling access to strangers to their Plex library.
Yeah, like the people who have access to my Plex library are
family and close friends.
Family and very close people I do podcasts with, basically.
Okay, that's fair. Anyway, sorry, I got off topic there, but all I was trying to say is like, you are putting a relatively thin link between storage and compute with the model that you and a lot of our listeners are talking about. Whereas like that was always the appeal of doing everything on the one machine to me is like you're going over some incredibly fast interconnects between the CPU and the storage. Yeah, but in one box,
But like the Blu-ray discs that I've ripped are all either H.264 or increasingly H.265 or HEVC.
Yeah, right.
So like you're looking at like a 20 to 50 megabit bit rate at most.
So that's the thing. That's another thing. I'm also a lunatic who does not recompress discs after I rip them.
Yeah, no, that's just madness.
I know it's madness, but look.
So I rip the discs, I recompress them. The heaviest thing I do is that. The heaviest compute thing I do is probably game servers. And they're actually memory and a little bit of compute. They're mostly single threaded though. So like you want like an 8-core machine or a 6-core machine for if you're going to run a couple of game servers and a Plex server. You want some sort of hardware acceleration for video transcode. If you're going to run a Plex server, probably, especially if you're doing HEVC and tone mapping HDR files for HD viewing.
Yep.
And at the same time, I wanted a NAS that handles things like graceful failover. I can put a hot spare in, stuff like that. And when you look at doing that yourself, you can. It's way cheaper, both in terms of upfront cost and ongoing power cost, if you just buy a cheap. I mean, I'm air quoting cheap because it was like $700, but a cheap all-in-one. Oh, and the other thing that's important, I wanted something that was going to be convenient to use headless or small enough that I could carry it into the office and plug it into a monitor, not something that I have to like yeet off the shelves and hope I catch it right as it's on its way down that weighs 80 pounds.
Wait, you're exaggerating, right?
My existing...
It's not actually...
Flanders is pretty hefty.
Wow, really?
It doesn't weigh 80 pounds, but it weighs... It's like... It's high up, and the angle at which you have to pull it down puts a lot of stress on you in a weird way that makes me worry that I'm going to accidentally kill myself with a server. There's a reason we don't put servers on the top shelf usually in data centers, right?
There's a lot of ways to go, and that one is pretty noble, all things considered.
I mean, it would be right on the nose. It would be very on brand.
Let me ask one quick question before we get into the actual Synology stuff here. you're talking about running single-threaded stuff on multi-core. Is it safe to assume that like your average, like what is it, a scheduler, I guess, is the thing in the OS that doles out processes to different cores, right? Is that the term? Like, I assume it's easily smart enough these days to say like, okay, you have 3 or 4 single-threaded things. It's just going to assign them out to different cores.
They go to the right place
intelligently, right?
You don't, that's not a problem anymore. And the last time that was a problem, really, assuming your OS is you're running a modern OS, was on those Intel. Remember when Intel used to put 2 CPUs that had to interconnect across the PCI Express bus?
Yeah.
So like you didn't have any kind of high speed interconnect between the CPU threads.
Oh, are you talking about on just like the old school dual CPU boards?
No.
Was this like early Core 2 Duo type
this
stuff?
This is Core 2 Duo stuff.
I didn't.
Halem, I think. I can't remember.
Oh my God. I did not realize they did that. That's terrible.
Yeah, they might have talked across the North Bridge, but anyway, the point is they didn't have any kind of like cache level interconnect between the different CPU cores. So
it's like what AMD calls the Infinity Fabric now, right? The little controller between. Yeah,
it's all the chiplet. It's the things that made it's imagine a chiplet without the thing that lets the chiplets talk to each other.
That seems bad.
Those CPUs were really great right up until the moment that your two independent core CPUs had to talk to each other, and then it all went to shit. So yeah, that shouldn't be a problem if your OS is set up right.
Okay, so we won't spend a lot of time on it in this episode, but since I am also looking at rebuilding my NAS, I've been looking at like Intel's current lineup, and a lot of their chips have got the performance cores and efficiency cores on the same die, and I'm just it's got me wondering like how tasks are scheduled and doled out in situations like that.
So for that performance core and efficiency core thing, you do need OS level support to make sure that it directs stuff to the right things. That's why they recommend Windows 11 for the 12 series Intel CPUs.
Wow.
Because Windows 10 doesn't have that.
That's good to know. I did not know that at all.
I mean, they work otherwise.
I would be shocked if Linux and FreeBSD did not account for that.
My guess is you need a specific kernel version to get the right scheduling for that stuff on the newer Intel machines for Linux. Though
actually, the bummer for somebody who wants to run this machine 24/7, and I promise I'll stop after this, is that they kind of seem to only put the E-cores in the i7s and above.
Yeah,
the desktop i3s and i5s do not have efficiency cores in them, which kind of really sucks for somebody who wants to let that machine run all the time.
Well, they're probably just slow enough that it doesn't matter, right?
I don't
know. But so that power thing is an important consideration, because like that's both a hardware and an OS problem, right?
Yeah.
Like part of the problem with Flanders is that it runs BSD, and the power management in BSD is notorious for being non-existent.
Okay, look, we need to moderate our stance here.
It was non-existent until about 2 years ago, and then they started paying attention to it a little bit.
I mean, you can't now because Flanders is dead, I guess. But like, you can drop to a terminal in BSD and run a power D-V, and you can watch your CPU frequency oscillates in real time. That's 6700K I have in there idles at 800 megahertz in BSD.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Like, I mean, you'll see it spike like every few seconds as the system has it doing stuff, but like it does employ the C states to drop down to like pretty manageable frequency.
Oh, okay.
But Linux, I think Linux definitely probably has better modern power management, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I think that was the consensus of all the stuff that I had read. And that's why the smaller Linux machine that I can pick up and carry in the other room easily seems compelling without having to carry 40 pounds of drives. So with that in mind, I did a lot of reading about the different kinds of NASs that are around, and for a bunch of reasons that we don't necessarily need to get into, and maybe I don't remember because it was like 2 months ago. I ended up going with the Synology stuff, mainly because people seem to really like the software, like the both people in the Discord, other folks I've talked to, and reviews that I read seem to recommend their software, especially for their Intel or x86 or x64 based platform. The ARM support was a little bit less enthusiastic, though, because they have ARM x86 Intel and x86 Ryzen boxes, and the performance on the ARM boxes was less than I was looking for. because I do want to be able to transfer files. I do want 100 megabyte per second transfer speeds on the gigabit Ethernet in the house. I didn't really care about getting faster than 1 gigabit, although most of the mid-range Synologies have multiple ports that you can bond together if your switch supports that. Or do, I guess, seamless failover is the other way to do it, or bind specific applications to specific interfaces. But like I said, like the being able to transfer large files is nice. The fastest thing that I need real-time performance on is like a 50 megabit Blu-ray, HD Blu-ray or UHD Blu-ray stream. So I'm fine with gigabit on that. Single gigabit on that is fine. And I ended up going with a Disk Station DS1520 Plus, which is a Celeron J4125 4 cores that runs at default 2 gigahertz with a burst clock up to 2.7 gigahertz. It ships with 8 gigs of RAM, and it has 5 bays plus an M2 slot that you can put an M2 SSD in for cache purposes.
Celeron J4125 is a Gemini Lake part.
Yeah, I don't know. Gemini Lake is a spinoff of one of the other. It's the Celeron version of one of the newer 8 or 9 series. I can't remember.
That sounds. Yeah, this came out in 2019, so that sounds right. Probably ninth gen. Something like that. It's 14 nanometer.
Yeah, it's I would say it does not light the world on fire in performance, but for this purpose, it's exactly what I wanted, because I didn't want something that was going to use a whole boatload of power when it's running 24/7.
Oh, I shouldn't have just closed that ARC page because I've got the TDP on the thing is 10 watts. Man.
Yeah. So
I'm jealous. Kind of.
Well, I was going to say the spec sheet. So I went looking for my watt meter, and I think I returned it to test it when I quit because I haven't tried to use it since then. I wasn't able to find it. But the spec sheet says that with 1 terabyte Western Digital drives, and this is a good point because like the number of drives you have in here is going to determine the power usage. Is that it's 15.5 watts when the drives are in like the hibernation mode, when they're not spinning, because it'll spin them down after when there's not access for a period of time.
Wait, are you a spin downer?
I am a spin downer on new drives. As the drives get older, I become a spin upper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If you have drives that you've had running nonstop for multiple years, you should not switch them to spin down. If you're starting with new drives, you can have them spin down and spin up without a problem. If the lubricant on the bearings breaks down, then to spin up and spin down will seize them, and you can't seize them, and you'll have problems.
Sure. I always worried that something would constantly be trying to access them, as every time they spun down, they would spin right back up.
Well, that
was my fear.
On TrueNAS, that's why I had the SSD cache, because then theoretically the things that are causing it to spin up and spin down right to the SSD, and then it dumps it out every couple hours from the SSD to the hard drives. It's 37 watts while the drives are being accessed. And that's, again, like that's 1 terabyte drives. I put 14 terabyte element drives in there. So that means I shucked.
Oh, I was going to ask I was trying to remember. The elements are external drives.
Yeah, the elements are relatively inexpensive external drives. They do not use NAS drives. There's a whole host of reasons that this is a bad idea, but I'm doing it as an experiment, and it's getting backed up, so I don't care.
Yeah, well, as somebody who instead went and bought a bunch of Red Pros a few months ago, I went the complete opposite direction.
That's what I'd always done in the past, but they're so expensive now.
It's so expensive.
And like I ended up with 25 gigs of usable space on a 3-disc array, or 26 gigs of usable space on a 3-disc array.
26 terabytes?
Sorry, terabytes. I'm tired. It's been a long week, Brad.
I get it.
26 terabytes of usable space on a 3-disc array. If I had spent the same amount of money on Reds, I would have ended up with about 18, I think was where it worked out. I was going to end up with like 8 terabyte drives instead of 14 terabyte drives. So, and since I wasn't using, FreeNAS and the ZFS stuff, I didn't have to worry about the shingle drives are less of a concern. So, let's see, 8 gigs RAM, you have 1 slot to expand that's pre-populated with 4 gigs in this particular model.
Is that your standard like laptop style
or laptop memory? I think, but I don't know.
SODIMM or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think you have to buy it. They recommend that you buy it from them. I didn't pay attention to what the form factor is. My intention is not to put anything on here that would require me to increase the memory in it ever.
Yeah.
And it does, like I said, it has the M2 slot for the cache, which probably the next time I retire a laptop that has an appropriate M2 card, I'll just drop in. 4 gigabit Ethernet ports.
To be clear, I mean, well, 4 gigabit is not a standard, so I guess I know the answer. That's 4 1 gigabit ports.
It's 4 1 gigabit Ethernet ports. Yeah.
Okay.
And 2 USB 3.2 ports. It's the fast one. It's the Gen 1 USB 3. They renamed everything a few months ago, and I can never remember what the new naming system is.
Are they still blue? That's the question.
They are still blue.
Okay. Enough said.
Here, I have a USB cheat sheet here. Let's see. USB 3.2 Gen 1 is 5 gigabits signal.
Never underestimate the USB consortium's ability to make things more complicated.
Yeah, it sucks. It's really bad. So that's kind of the hardware stuff.
Did you mention the 2 eSATA ports?
2 eSATA ports, which I don't know who the hell is going to use an eSATA port in 2022, but whatever. I'm sure somebody does.
You wrote LOL next to that.
Yeah, I did put LOL next to it. And you can expand this with secondary drive cages. So you can get like a drive cage that doesn't have a CPU. That's just like the drive cages and the IO stuff.
Like a backplane kind of thing?
Yeah. And it plugs in through a proprietary thing that lets you can use it either as additional drives, like for the main storage volumes. You can back up the main array to it, or you can put more, do failovers for each individual drive or whatever. You can put 2 of those into this, daisy chain 2 of these into this.
Interesting. That's cool.
They're expensive. It doesn't seem like a good idea for what it's worth. It seems like you'd be better off replacing drives with bigger capacity drives, but your mileage may vary.
Does this have any kind of expansion slot? I'd swear I've seen that with some Synology models where you could drop like a 10 gigabit network adapter or something. I don't know if that's like just a straight up PCIe slot or if it's something custom or how that works.
So it's a custom interface for what looks like a PCIe slot. And this one doesn't have it. The replacement. So the 1520 Plus, I literally bought this in the last month that those were available. I knew that the new one was coming, but I was worried about drive failure taking out my entire array and didn't want to have quite literally didn't want to have to restore 10 terabytes of data. So I bought it anyway. The 1522 Plus, which is the replacement model for this, uses a slightly newer CPU and has that proprietary adapter that's a 10 gig Ethernet fiber
or
connector.
Anything, right? If it's just a
it might just be Ether, actually, when I think about it. Yeah, I looked at it. Hold on. Let's see. I have
potentially put other stuff in there besides network adapters.
I think it's proprietary enough. You're only going to be able to put network adapters in.
Oh, weird. Huh.
Yeah. That would be my guess. And I don't know that you can plug in like a GPU or something like that if you want to use GPU transcode or whatever on this with the USB.
Do you know if you could aggregate multiple of those 1 gigabit Ethernet ports potentially?
Depending on the model you get, you absolutely can aggregate them. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's an option.
I'm telling you. Let's see. I'm scrolling up here. Yeah. The one that I have has link aggregation and failover, assuming you support link aggregation. It turns out it's kind of complicated. There's multiple formats for that. And
I've always heard it's maybe not as simple or kind of reliable is not the word I'm looking for, but it's not as straightforward as you might think.
Yeah, you need support on the switch end. You need support. You need to support the same spec on the switch and the endpoints. And it's not like you can just put 2 network cards in your computer and it'll work. You need to get 2 of the right network cards and all that. My switch and my NAS do not support the right formats, I don't believe. But like I said, it doesn't apply to me. So what I did do was bind Plex to one IP address, and the Docker and the other apps are on the other one. So you can choose which IP address, like each interface gets its own IP address if they're not aggregated, and you can choose which goes to which IP, it turns out really convenient because Docker is kind of a pain in the ass about changing IP addresses for a lot of applications.
That's one reason I'm constantly going on tangents around here. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn here because I don't know a ton about Docker, but yeah, that was my understanding. And one thing I like about jails and LXC is the same in Linux, and discrete VMs are also the same. I love each container having its own discrete network interface, because then every container has its own IP on your LAN.
It's much easier to manage,
which
it turns out.
Makes it real easy when almost every service you're running has its own web interface when they all have their own IP on the LAN.
For example, my Unify application that manages the Wi-Fi access points in my house used to run in a jail on Flanders, and I was trying to put it in a Docker container on this machine, and it conflicts with another application that's running in a plugin. So that's why I had to do the multiple IP addresses thing. It turns out just plugging another Ethernet port in was not a problem because I have a bunch of ports on the switch.
Sure.
But like hoops that I didn't need to jump through.
Yeah, again, I would love to hear from people who use Docker consistently or in depth. But my understanding is you're mostly stuck with some kind of host shared IP situation. You're probably hitting different ports on the host IP to get to the container network.
So you can there are ways around that now using VLANs and stuff on the Linux side. From my reading, I got to the point where I was like, this is going to create a maintenance nightmare for me, and I don't want to fool with it. So I'm just going to do it the easy, stupid way, which has worked out well so far. As for the configuration on this, like it's a web interface. You plug it in, you boot it up. It says, hey, I'm going to download the OS. What account do you want to connect this to? Do you want to do a local account? Do you want to do a remote account? I did a local account because I don't need to use their remote stuff to access my data remotely. And it's just one more point of security failure for me to have connected to some cloud service. But if you don't want to fool with like WireGuard or something like that yourself and do a VPN into your house, then you can connect through their portal. And it from reading, it seems fine. There's no need for me to add that to add another point of failure.
I do not love the proliferation of remote cloud-based admin in devices of this type and routers and you name it, like access point. Like everybody wants you to register an account and go through their servers to admin the thing in your house. And no.
I didn't mind doing that with Google, with my Google Wi-Fi routers, the ones that I had previously, just because like my Google account's locked down, it has 2-factor and all that stuff attached. I'm less worried about it. The smaller a company I deal with and the less security focused company or conscious company I'm dealing with, the less excited I am about that.
That's exactly it. Like I'm not worried about Google getting compromised, but some of these other device makers, I don't know.
Oh, last thing about the noise. They report, I think, 37 decibels. That seems high. Actually, that's right. I think. Sorry, 20.8 decibels average.
I think that's decent. That's not too bad.
It has a quiet mode, a loud mode, and a normal mode. I have run it in quiet. I can't hear whether the switch fans or those fans are the loud ones. They're right next to each other. So like I put it in the garage. It lives in my garage. Doesn't get cold here though, so probably that's fine. So manage everything through the web interface. There's a package interface on the web interface that lets you download like a whole host of CLI tools if you want that. You can put Python and Mono and .NET, all of the dependency stuff that you might need for other plugins. If a plugin has a dependency, it'll just it'll say, hey, you got to get this in order for this to work, and just download it automatically, just like you would expect on a Linux package manager.
Can you install stuff manually at the command line, or do you have to get it all through their kind of plugin repository?
I haven't. I'll be honest. I have. Oh, yes, you can absolutely download stuff manually and install it. I've done that through the web interface, just so you have one point of contact for, do you need updates?
Okay.
Which has worked pretty well so far.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious how much they let you treat this like a straight up computer if you want to. Like even on TrueNAS is like the opposite of that, which because you're installing it on like commodity x86 hardware, it is literally a computer, and yet they heavily discourage you from installing stuff yourself. Like they straight up say, hey, this is an appliance. Do not install packages on your own. Like you're risking messing stuff up bad if you get in here and tinker too much.
So I'm using the TrueNAS rule of if you're going to install something, install it in this case Docker or through the plugin options.
That is absolutely put it in some sandbox.
Yeah, because the upgrade process for new versions of DSM, DSM is I think Disk Station Manager is what the acronym stands for.
Yeah. Yes.
It seems like it's going to have the same problem that TrueNAS has, where it'll wipe out anything you do to the main OS if you make significant changes, or at least it will cause problems with the upgrade. So yeah, you also can SSH, and like I installed SSH immediately, or turn on SSH immediately and SSH into the machine. DSM is based on Linux. I think it's based on a Debian. It's a Debian fork, but I could be wrong about that.
Can we talk file systems? Is now a good time for that?
We can talk about file systems if you want.
I kind of fancy myself a bit of an armchair file system nerd.
Yeah.
And I'm curious just like
file systems.
What the process was like when you plugged drives in.
So you plug a drive in and it says, hey, this drive doesn't have anything on it. You want to delete whatever's on here and make it ready for the NAS? And I was like, sure, that sounds great. I will totally do that. And then it said, hey, there's no volume on this. There's, after you made the volume, it said, hey, there's no, after you make the storage pool with one disk. I did it with one disk at first so I could bring copy stuff over, and then added the other two as they arrived. You can expand the volumes dynamically. You don't have to add a specific number. The file system is BRFS, BetterFS, is I think the pronunciation for the non-renem.
I think it's open ended. I think you can there are multiple. I like ButterFS. Just
ButterFS is the other. Yeah. It also supports ext4 if you want to roll old school. You can plug in a drive that's ext4 internally, pull the data off of that onto your storage pool or your volume inside a storage pool, and then add that drive to the storage pool if you want to get really crazy. For external drives, USB, it supports a bunch of other stuff, including like NTFS and ext, whatever Mac OS uses now. I can't even remember. And FAT32 extended and all of those. BRTF, ButterFS, X4, X3, FAT, NTFS, HFS Plus, or XFAT.
That's the Mac OS one, is HFS Plus.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Well, this is out of scope for this episode. I'm curious what else is running under the hood to manage arrays in that thing, like Linux style. If there's like LVM or MDADM,
you mean SSH into a PSAX,
stuff like that in there. I don't know if that would show up in the process list. I don't have a great grasp of how that stuff works because I'm all ZFS all the time around here. But
so the thing I'll say is that the stuff that you see through the web interface is pretty cleaned up and safe. Like you can access anything that's in a share from the file manager in the web interface. If you get in the terminal, you can get into like your /var and /user folders and stuff like that.
I'm okay. Huh.
Like
it's
okay.
I have ended up on a Synology Knowledge Center page called "How can I use a PC to recover data when my Synology NAS malfunctions?"
Oh, there you go.
They straight up have you installing Ubuntu, then installing MDADM and LVM2 actually, and then walking you through how to access the array on the drives. So I guess that stuff is running under the hood.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the thing that my understanding from the reading I did beforehand is that you're basically like running a prettied up version of Linux.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's how people traditionally do raids on Linux, like the components like that. I'm just curious if that's what's in there or if it was something proprietary that they had spun up, but it sounds like it is. That's kind of standard stuff.
So yeah, you let's see, the SSH stuff. The only time I've used SSH for the most part was to like rsync stuff over from the old server onto the new server, which took like 3 days, I think, all told, 2.5-3 days to do 10 terabytes of data across the 1 gigabit.
From not Flanders.
From Flanders to Neddy.
Oh, wait. So the data was accessible through Flanders?
Well, yeah, because I had one drive fail on a parity array.
It was just one drive. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then recently the second drive let loose the mortal coil, which caused some downwind effects.
I see. Okay. So you were 0 drives of redundancy away from
for 2 months. I wanted to see how long the drives would last.
From catastrophic failure.
I was 0 drives away from catastrophic failure for about 18 hours, which is why.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like I had been watching the price of those 14 terabyte Elements drives because that's what I determined was the kind of sweet spot for me. They were hovering between $200 and $250 on sale using Shuckstop, the website. I think it's Shuckstop.
It's shucks.top, I believe.
Yeah, shucks.top. That's
let me double check that.
Or
yes, that's right.
Top. Yeah.
Shucks.top is yes.
So they're hovering between 200 and 250 bucks. And I bought one when they were $200. I hadn't opened it up yet. It was just sitting here waiting for more. And I just wanted to spread out the purchases a little bit.
Okay. I was just trying to get a sense of how dangerously you like to live.
Not very.
So you had two drives of redundancy. You lost one and you were like, I'm just going to keep going for 2 months.
So I only had a parity drive. So I had 3 drives. I had 3 drives. One failed. If a second one failed, I would have lost everything.
Oh, I thought a second one did fail.
So the first one failed in like the early May.
Okay.
That was the day I went to Central Computer and bought the Synology because it was $32 more expensive there than it was anywhere else I could find. I was like, that is a reasonable price to pay to have it right now.
Uh-huh.
And then I came home that afternoon and I opened up the 14 terabyte drive that was sitting in my storage for the last 3 months. And I put that drive in and I started copying data off of Flanders immediately. Okay. They've been running in parallel since.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That makes more sense.
Yeah. And then the other 2, I ordered 2 more drives that day that arrived later, and I had parity running on Neddy at that point, and everything's been fine since then. So Neddy is the new, it's like, it's small. It's baby Flanders.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta have a theme, Brad.
We should do an entire episode of having people send us their names for their like computers and other nodes on their network.
People sent a bunch in on questions episodes for a while.
That's possible, maybe so. I feel like everybody's got their own naming scheme.
Yeah, of course. So that all happened in May. The second drive on Flanders conked out the other day.
With you now, yes.
But honestly, I rebooted the machine. It's fine again. So I managed to pull, for listeners of the Patreon episode, I managed to pull all of the Plex data off the current Plex data. And did actually manage to get it ported over. The problem I was having is that the version of Plex that's in the package manager store on the Synology package manager site store app is ancient. Is really old.
You are forever going to have your Plex server having a notification up there saying, "Hey, there's a new server available. You should go upgrade." And you're going to be like, "I can't."
Nope. Because I went to the site, the Plex site where they do a new version every update and just pulled the Plex version from their site manually and installed it manually.
Did you just replace the binary manually or what?
No. There's their package manager. It's like Flatpaks.
Oh,
so
I see. Okay.
They provide hold on, I'll tell you what the file extension is. It's like SNPK or something. It is an SPK file, which maybe is a Synology pack would be my guess, that has all the stuff in it. And it magically worked when you installed it. And then all the documentation that was on that page that we discussed on the Patreon episode was correct.
I see.
Yeah. So aside from the R-syncing, every other time I thought, I should SSH to the machine to do this, probably that was a mistake. And I should have just used the UI would be the TLDR.
Fair.
And then the other thing that I love, because I never bothered to set up email notifications on the TrueNAS box after 10 years, is I have an app on my phone that gets a notification that does go out through their third-party shit. Man. Anytime there's some sort of error on the device.
Man, that is exactly what I want to set up on my NAS. And I've been looking, of course, into all kinds of open source solutions that I'm going to have to manually set up to do it.
This took about 30 seconds to set up. It was really nice.
I generally lean away from proprietary closed options, but like that's pretty appealing. So I just full disclosure, haven't had a bad sector yet. So I don't know if it actually works, but it seems like it works. The test notification went through. So yeah, there's a bunch of plugins. The one thing I will say is that app doesn't give you any kind of manageability through the phone. All the manageability you have to run through the web interface, which does work on the phone browser, but it's pretty small. Huh. What is the app for then?
The app is just a notification receptacle.
Oh, that's it?
I mean, it does some other stuff too. It lets you like I think you can light up, hold on. It's you can turn on the lights if you have a whole bunch of these in a server room or something. You can make the lights blink so you can find a particular hard drive or machine, I think. But yeah, for the most part, it doesn't do a whole lot. You can install some apps inside this app that lets you have access to the drive and stuff like that, but I'm intentionally not turning that on because I don't want that stuff accessible from outside the house. And I think you can add users to the machines from this as well, which is like you can do light updating, I guess. But it does have a deep link to your web interface if you're inside the right subnet or whatever. And the plugins, like there's plugins for everything from most of their core functionality is built as a plugin now. So like SMB support is a plugin, the file manager is a plugin. So they update those kind of sporadically all the time.
That's really, well, I started to say that's really interesting that something as critical as SMB is not just built into the main interface, but I guess maybe that's why, is that they can iterate it faster as a plugin.
I mean, I would guess it's the same reason that like Apple pulled the Mail app from the main image install, is so that they can update it independently of the main OS. Yeah. You can also install Docker as a plugin. We talked about it a little bit already. Docker kind of sucks, like especially if you're used to jails.
I mean, I don't have the experience to agree or disagree.
Okay. Docker doesn't suck. Stop writing your angry letters. The thing about Docker is it has its own, I've become accustomed to the inadequacies and kind of foibles and potential pitfalls of jails in BSD.
I think jails are pretty capable, personally.
I like jails a lot.
Jails are really good.
Yeah,
I wish Linux had anything as robust as jail's been around fucking ever. They're like 20 years old. Like they've had time to mature.
Yeah, I have a lot of understanding of the places that they work well and the places that they don't, and the things you have to do to work around the things that they're bad at. I don't have that knowledge for Docker.
Yeah, the declamatory way in which you expressed that feeling was very amusing to me. And like, I think there are plenty of people on the Discord who might not disagree with you about Docker.
Here's the thing. Probably for the work that I do and what I use this for and the amount of hassle I want to deal with, my solution is to put a hypervisor on another machine and just run VMs for whatever I want to do and not worry about Docker.
Yeah, do that.
Or I have to learn a lot more about Docker, and I don't know that I started going down some Docker tutorials and I was like, shit, I'm just typing stuff in and I have no idea what I'm doing, and I hate that. Like, that's a bad feeling.
Right. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess if you did a bunch of Docker stuff on this box, you're kind of contravening your own philosophy, right? Of putting all the compute and services on something else. Yeah.
So the next step, is to replace. Right now, Flanders is running with the SSD that was the cache previously as a drive to do shit on. But I do also have Plex running on the NAS. The interesting thing is, like, that CPU supports QuickSync, and Plex theoretically should be able to use QuickSync, which it looks like it's doing. The performance for 1080p stuff is brilliant. It's great. It's working fine. The performance for 4K, anything 4K, is bad unless everything is supported natively. So like Plex for Windows, the application runs great. Plex in the browser, on any of the browsers I've tried for any 4K stuff, has real performance problems.
I'm going to tell you, as an occasional Smithflix user, even Flanders struggled a little bit with 4K stuff, and that was not, as far as I know, transcoding. That was just trying to serve it as is. Not struggle. I shouldn't say struggled, but there was quite a bit of buffering involved.
You never would have gotten 4K that wasn't being transcoded from outside of the LAN. No, I had it set to always turn that down to like 15 megabits.
Interesting. Okay. That explains.
I wish also, if you had told me that, I would have adjusted that. I didn't realize it was a problem.
I mean, that would be a fun experience. I only tried it to see how it would work.
So the other thing, the super secret thing, is that the 4K stuff is mostly not accessible to people that aren't in the house.
Fair. Okay.
Because I haven't bought a ton of 4K discs just because they're a pain in the ass to rip.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't really, partially because it took a lot of buffering. I didn't spend much actual time trying to watch 4K stuff. It was more just out of curiosity.
Yeah. So yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't, not to interrupt, just real quick. I don't have the exact answer here, but I was reading about QuickSync and Plex a little while back, and specifically how to tell if it's working or not.
So In the dashboard, it shows on the transcode that there's a little parentheses with HW after the transcode thread.
That is exactly what I found, is that you have to look in the dashboard while somebody is streaming something and see if it says that or not.
Yeah, and it didn't. It seemed worse when that was on.
Huh.
So
I don't know a ton. I can't speak in detail about this, but like I said, I've been going through Intel chips, and different SKUs, even in the same generation, have different integrated GPUs and different versions of QuickSync in them. And from generation to generation, they also upgrade QuickSync. So I wonder if that being an older, both a relatively low end part and like 3 or 4 generations old, maybe it's just that QuickSync is not super up to snuff.
Well, so that machine isn't a super low end part. It's like a Broadwell E5850.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about the Celeron and the.
Oh yeah, the Flanders one was a 5850, I think.
Okay.
And the Celeron, it's entirely possible the Celeron's just not capable of it.
Right. That's what I meant. Yeah.
I tried. So before people start writing letters, I tried turning off subtitles. I tried using AC3 tracks. I tried using a video that I made with just has an AAC track. It all has problems. I think it's the tone mapping, honestly, because Plex does tone mapping now for HDR to SDR TVs. And my guess is that that's the thing that's causing the actual real issue, because that's kind of an expensive task that, as far as I know, isn't really accelerated, especially on the old, on the older, this machine has an old CPU in it, frankly. This is why I want to have something that's more capable for the computey stuff.
I am more and more convinced, the more I try it, that auto tone mapping, or even like manual tone mapping that I've tried, is like just a sort of in a pinch feature. It's like, well, if I really have to watch this thing on an SDR screen, like this is better than nothing, but it's never going to be close to ideal, because the auto tone mapping in Plex that I've tried was not super great. I tried to do it by hand with FFmpeg a little bit here and there. Like, it's watchable. It's
tone
watchable.
Mapping's hard. Tone mapping is hard. It is an actual real skill that requires art and practice and talent. And
we have at least 1 or 2 working colorists in film and TV on the Discord who I talked to a little bit about that. They were like, yeah, this is not a fire and forget. This is not like Handbrake where you're just like re-encoding your Blu-rays.
Yeah.
Like every single video, every movie is different. Like, it all requires like training, like deep understanding of how color works on a screen, and et cetera, et cetera.
How vision works. Yeah. So I think my solution for this is the least efficient solution, which is probably that I'm going to go dig the Blu-rays that went with those 4K discs out of the garage and just rip them and have 2 versions of the same movie. So it feeds the 1080p version, SDR version to 1080p clients, and the 4K version to 4K clients.
Oh, that just gets into how poorly Plex handles multiple versions of the same movie. I mean, it's terrible.
It does okay, but you have to manually select them, I think.
Oh, well, not only that, you can't differentiate what's what. You can't name the different versions. It will only describe the multiple versions by their resolution and bitrate. That's it.
Well, yeah, but it should work like Disney Plus, where when you click the button to play the movie, it just plays the one that's right for your TV. That's what it should do now. Well, if you have the right version of the server.
I'm getting into weird situations where I've got Harmy's despecialized Star Wars and also the 4K 77 version of Star Wars. You know what I mean? I'm like, those are both kind of this.
Yeah.
Or like I ripped and I don't need to keep both these around in perpetuity, but I ripped like the regular theatrical Terminator 2 and also the kind of director's cut with all the extra scenes in it.
The handling of director's cuts especially is bad.
Right. Like you can put both of those into the same bucket. They both show up under Terminator 2 and Plex, but when you go to like other versions, it will just list 2 1080p files at about the same bit rate. And I'm like, I fucking don't know which one is which.
Well, but you see the file name, right?
No. It may depend on the client. It may depend on the endpoint that you're streaming to, but on like the Roku app and the Xbox app, it only shows resolution and bitrate. So there's no way to tell apart which one I'm actually watching.
Oh, the Apple TV shows runtime and file name, I think.
Okay. So that may just be a difference in client, but there's also like MB, for example, is probably the biggest competitor to Plex these days, which I've thought about messing with. Like that one, a little bit I messed with it. That one, you can actually just like put a thing in the file name, and it's like everything after this character in the file name will show up as the name of this version in your library.
That's nice.
Like it's way smarter about stuff like that. Plex is a little clunky.
I feel like we're at a point where with Plex where the open source stuff is probably getting very close, and I need to spend some time looking at the available options.
Yeah, the biggest problem I had with Emby was, this may have changed, but they wouldn't let you trial apps on different devices and like actually stream to them without having the paid pass.
Or do they make? Is that how they make money for Emby?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like a Plex Pass style business model, but the thing is, they, like the Plex apps at least let you stream like, what is it, 60 seconds before they cut you off?
Something like
enough to know if it works, right? It's like, I need to at least see what the quality of the apps that you have is before I think about giving you money. And like, that was, yeah. And then there's Jellyfin is the fully open source kind of.
Kodi also too.
Yeah, Kodi. I mean, Kodi's pretty old school. I think it's got more of a kind of old school media library vibe to it, as opposed to like a more Plex style thing, right? For
what it's worth, I like the design stuff that they've done with the Plex over the last few years. I like and honestly, that Discover thing that they added a couple of updates ago is surprisingly useful. You tell it which streaming services you have, and it's like, hey, here's the things that are new on all of your streaming services.
Weird.
It's a surprisingly useful feature.
Wild. It pulls in other services now.
It doesn't. You don't watch the stuff from inside that service. I think depending on the platform, I think it launches the app for the service.
Interesting.
And like deep links you into the but it's basically like it's the same thing that the Apple TV app does on the Apple TV boxes, where it gives you like a landing page for all of the stuff that's available on the platform at any given time. It's not bad. So yeah, I have to figure out better backup for Neddy too, because like right now it's just backing everything up to one large drive, and because everything fits on one large drive right now, that won't last forever. But yeah, I'm looking at like 12 or 15 gigs of free space on this thing, and it's pretty nice. It's spacious. I got room to move again, which is cool.
Terabytes.
I keep saying gigabytes. I'm sorry. I'm so tired.
Okay.
Okay. So total cost, the NAS box with no drives was $700, which I could build a machine that was just about that price, that would be a little bit less capable and didn't have all the nice, like, hey, which drive is failing? It's the one with the light flashing on the front, which it turns out is a really nice feature to have. So you don't have to unplug 5 drives to figure out which one is the bad one. I did 3 drives in one storage pool. I have another drive that's the backup drive that's just plugged in its own pool. And I didn't have to do any modifications to get those Elements drives to work. Your mileage might vary because apparently there's different models, and some of them you have to put a piece of like Kapton tape over one of the pins on the SATA connector. I did not have to do that for any of the drives. And I usually plan to replace these drives after 3 years. So like the NAS drives come with a longer warranty, which is great if you actually use the warranty when the drives fail after 4 years. I generally I don't usually let them live long enough to fail, because it's like, I don't like living that dangerously. And I ran the tool that tells you what your M2 drive size should be. So it basically does a thing that analyzes your disk performance over a period of, it wants at least 7 days, but I let it go for a month. And it says at the end, okay, you can do 128 gigabyte SSD. That'll be fine. I haven't done that yet. I don't know that I need to for what I use the thing for.
Is that is that an NVMe drive?
It's an M2 NVMe, yeah. And they, so here's a weird thing about Synology that I didn't know, is that they recommend specific drives for everything. So like if you put a drive that's not on their compatibility list into the SSD, it's into your drive bay, it's going to go, this isn't on our list. We don't promise that everything's going to work with this, but it's fine. Same thing for the M2 drives.
I mean, this is a kind of separate topic. They have skirted some territory that people have not been thrilled about in the last year or two, about like approved drive, like hard drives and stuff like that. I am maybe not quite as informed about this topic as I should be. There have been a couple of hubbubs on the Discord about like, I think in one case they pulled support for something from old models that had previously had it, like patched it out, which people were very upset about. And then there was another case where they sort of gestured toward the idea that you might have to get hard drives from them for certain models. But I think they maybe walked that back.
So my understanding is that the hard drives, if you want a specific level of support and uptime guarantees and stuff like that on higher end, like business type NAS devices, you have to buy off their compatibility list or buy directly from them. I'm not in that market.
Yeah.
For home users, that don't worry about that. is my advice. And just to be clear, if you're in like a 3 or 4 nines uptime, like where you're saying, hey, we're going to give you 99.999 or 9999 uptime services, you're not buying your hard drives from Amazon to put in those devices. Like that's not how that side of the business works. So same thing for SAN stuff. So like storage area network stuff is generally speaking, it's not an option for that kind of device. We had some questions. If we want to do questions, or if you have other questions, we can get into it.
Nope. I can read these questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Here's one from Zuban. I think my major question is, realistically, how on top of replacing the drives do you need to be? And is there a warning if it detects a potential failure? I guess you kind of addressed that somewhat.
Well, okay. So on the NAS boxes, on the true NAS box, every time I've had a failure, I had bad sector warnings beforehand. I don't know if that's been the case for you, but
I never had a drive fail.
Oh, really?
Mine were starting to make weird noises when I replaced them this past spring.
Yeah.
Now I'm living in the horrible limbo where I can't, like the board in that machine won't post. Oh. I don't know if the power supply was involved in the death of the machine or not. So I don't know if my SAS card, my high-end network, 40 gig network card, and all of the drives are okay. So all the brand new fucking Red Pros I just bought like 4 months ago. I don't know currently if those drives are alive or not.
So my guess is that all of the hardware inside the board is fine. I would treat we talked about this on the Patreon episode, but from my perspective, the power supply and the motherboard are both suspect.
Oh yeah, no, that goes without saying. Yeah. I'm mostly worried about the drives because the drives are fine, very expensive, and
the drives are fine, and they're also warranted, so you're fine. Yeah. The worst thing is you would lose your data, which would be bad.
I've got the data's backed up.
Yeah.
Music.
Well, I was going to say, I usually treat drives for 24/7 use as 3 years. Like you start to think about replacing them after 3 years. And, and that's when I start looking for deals on hard drives, basically.
I had plain old Reds before this, and the warranty on those was 3 years, which of course is like great. You get past that point, and then just right when you start worrying about them is when they're no longer warranted. But the Red Pros are 5, so
yeah,
I'm curious to see how that goes over the course of the next 5 years if I end up like RMAing a drive or not.
Well, and I've warranted Reds before with Western Digital, and like the experience was good. I had drive failures. I had sector failures on a drive that was like 2 years old. I was able to give them my credit card and cross ship the drive. So they sent me the drive. I just put that in the machine, copied the stuff off the old drive, put it in the new one, and sent it back. And it was no problem.
My experience with Western Digital RMAs has not been amazing.
You were at a bad time for RMAs.
Well, it's worse. I remember there was
the shingled drive back, right?
Well, I bought no. I bought a shingle drive, and it was one I didn't, and then they replaced it with a non-shingle drive. The thing I was going to say is I plugged that drive in when I got it to make sure it worked, and it was fine.
Yeah.
Put it back in the static bag in the closet until like 2 months ago. Pull it back out, plugged it in, completely dead.
Oh,
100% dead, and making some weird high pitched sounds and super dead. So it's not like it can't read the drive. It's like the drive. I think the electronics, like the controller on the drive, is dead because the system can't even see it in the BIOS. So essentially, they sent me, they made me a drive that
it had zero life.
It's basically dead on arrival. So I need to see if they'll replace it again, which I doubt.
But yeah, so plan to replace them at the end of 3 years would be so start looking for new drives after 3 years. So like you have to factor that into your budget, right?
At least be vigilant.
Yeah, I mean, my intent with this is for the NAS container to last for a pretty long time. Like two sets of drives at least would be my minimum, and I would hope we could get 3, which would put it at like 10 years when it's time to replace it. And then the other smaller, more powerful machine potentially could be upgraded a little bit more often than that.
Yeah. Music asked about power draw and noise. I think you pretty much addressed that already. Yeah,
the power draw. I'll if somebody sends a question in a couple months, I'm going to order when we're back a watt meter to plug in here, just so we can kind of see what's going on with it. But like 37 watts is running way less than that free NAS machine is.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
For Xeon, yeah.
Yeah.
Bodhisaurus. Was this question truncated? I'm not sure. They say, I'm thinking about putting it in my garage. Is that a Synology? Were they referring to something
Synology, yeah,
from a previous message?
Yeah, I think so.
But my garage is also incredibly dusty. Are there any special precautions I should take? Are there any concerns about keeping it warm? I live in Alaska, and the garage gets down to the 40s in the winter.
I think the 40s is fine.
You think so? Is that
For the, like
40,
the operating,
40s? Sure.
The operating temperature is usually freezing to like 70 Fahrenheit or something.
Yeah,
or 120 Fahrenheit. Sorry,
like below freezing is definitely a bit dodgier. Yeah,
I wouldn't want to run it if it gets cold enough that you got to worry about like lubricants getting viscous.
Yeah,
but other than that, I think you're fine.
Yeah, so pretty robust, pretty hardy in hail.
And I would say garage is fine. You can access the places where dusts are going to build up on the fan. Just keep it clean. Keep it clean. Keep it clean.
Okay.
You know, the normal.
There you go.
So that's it. That's the Synology.
I'm happy for you in the life you've chosen.
Thanks, Brad. I'm so glad. I'm sorry. Look, it's not you. It's just the amount of time I have to put into it, honestly.
That's fair. I get it. Hey, Flanders is dead. Long live Neddy.
Yeah. Neddy for life, baby. It's so small. It's itsy bitsy. It's like a pizza. It's like a bread box.
I started my whole NAS thing started off with plans to buy a Synology.
Yeah. And I mean, here's the thing. If I were starting from now, I think this is a good place to get in, but I would also immediately run out of run. I would have run out of runway on the CPU performance on this thing within about 10 minutes of getting it.
Sure.
So either I would not get the one that has the Celeron, like I would get the one with the actual real CPU in it, or alternately, I would plan out of the gate to do something stupid and spend another few $100 on another small computer to do the compute stuff on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious to hear down the line how what your compute node ends up being and how that goes.
Yeah, it's tough. I looked at NUCs, the Intel NUC machines, the little box ones, and they're such a mess because they sell them to like screwdriver shops, and then you have to figure out like which bundle you want from them, and like they're all over. Like they're everything from like machines that are designed to like be stuck behind a monitor in a hospital room, all the way down to like actual, like real, like little computers that can actually do some real compute on them. And like, I don't want to spend $1,200 on that, but I also want something that's reasonably capable. So I might actually just build something for that. I haven't decided yet, but anyway, build like an ITX machine that I can put a small GPU in to do some GPU transcode stuff on.
If you've got like an old 1080 laying around or something.
Yeah, I have a 1060 Ti that is maybe viable for that. Anyway, we'll see. It's not urgent. Flanders will continue working in that capacity for the time being.
Fair. Okay, I guess Flanders is not totally dead yet.
Yeah, so Flanders was booting off of an SSD and not off of a thumb drive, and the other SSD is serving as storage now for the work that it does.
Fair.
This is Brad. We've reached the end of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You know what we do at the end of podcasts?
Let's go crack a cold one because it's 4th of July, baby.
Woo! We thank our patrons also.
Oh, thank you, patrons, for allowing us to buy that beer.
Thank you, patrons. We appreciate you. If you would like to find out how to support Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod, which is a 100% listener-supported show, just like America, 100% taxpayer-funded.
Sure.
I don't know. I was trying to make it. I was trying to get in the spirit of the holiday, but
I'm not feeling the spirit particularly right now.
You can find out how to support the show by going to patreon.com/techpod. That's patreon.com/techpod. And for as little as $2 a month, you too can support our podcast, where we do this every week. And if you pay $5 a month, you get a patron episode every month, which this month, like we got into some real command line business at the end of that one. That was a weird show.
That was a weird real-time verbal walkthrough of some permission fiddling, I guess.
Yeah, but hey, it worked.
I introduced you to HTOP in real time.
HTOP, it turns out, is way better than PSAUX. Who knew?
You were like, wow, look at all those colors, and it's just navigable with keyboard, like the arrow keys. Wow.
It was really. I've used it 3 times since you introduced me to that.
HTOP rules. It looks cool. It is very useful. You can customize it. Go try going into the settings at some point and see that top display where it shows all the cores and the uptime and the cache saturation, all that stuff. There are a bunch more of those units built in that you can add that aren't enabled by default.
Hold on, we can't give any more of this content. This is Patreon episode content. H-Top is exclusively limited to the Patreon episode.
All right, next month, T-Mux.
But yeah, thank you to all of our patrons, including I realized we didn't probably do our associate producer tier patrons on the last episode because I didn't realize it was the last episode of the month. So we'll do it here too.
Yeah, we better fix that. Well, we're recording this on the 1st of July. So we're right around the end of the month.
Close enough. Thank you as always to our executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky, Paddle Creek Games, makers of Fractured Veil, Jacob Chappell, James Kamek, Joel Krauska, Just Wedge, Octothorpe Bunny Crimes, Twinkies in Badge Life mode, and Twinkies in Badge Life mode. By the way, that Totoro badge, pretty good. Twinkie. And a very special thank you to our associate producer tier patrons, including Andre M. Burke, Arthur Gies, Dave Yulian, Eric Klein, Graham Banks, Jad Rita, Jason Nealand, Jay Maybe, Nathan Phelps, Steve Lynn, Thomas Shea, and Travis Rosner. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.
We do.
And I guess that'll do it for us this week. I'm going to be in Palm Desert next week when we talk.
Enjoy the drive down. I will be continuing to sift through motherboards and trying to buy a whole new computer.
They have those DS 1522s down at Central Computer.
Dude, I cannot find an LGA 1700 board in micro ATX with IPMI or Intel AMT to see if it saved my life. That's
like having a remote console into that board would make my life much easier.
That's exactly what I want.
Yeah, I
want remote I want out of band management.
Yeah,
and I cannot have it, and it's killing me.
Who doesn't? We all want out of band management, Brad.
It's the American dream.
Yeah, you're just in band for life. Anyway, see you all next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.